In this episode of Idea City.
So in the next 2 to 5 years, this patent-pending sensor could potentially lift the once dismal survival rates of pancreatic cancer from 5.5% to close to 100%.
It's in the nature of the way we see achievement that a lot more fanfare is involved when it's either a young person or an old person. And so I wasn't entirely surprised at the flurry of media attention that went to a 15-year-old who won the grand prize at the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair last year for his work in cancer research. But Jack Andraka's invention has the potential to transform medicine and save thousands of lives. It is a cheap, simple blood test to detect some of the most difficult, hard-to-diagnose cancers. And of course, it's very meaning to me personally. My mother died of ovarian cancer because it was not found until much too late. And my sister, Libby, who I invite to come out here on stage, was diagnosed with the most lethal form of cancer, which is pancreatic cancer, and that was 5 years ago. Libby.
Thank you. I have my 5th anniversary in a few weeks. Now, does everybody know where their pancreas is? Okay, let's have a look.
The pancreas is one of the various hormones-producing glands in the body. It is an elongated organ in the abdomen located in space behind the abdominal cavity. It lies beneath the stomach and is connected to the small intestine at the duodenum.
Okay, so it's in there somewhere. And that's why you wouldn't feel any symptoms until the disease is quite advanced and you wouldn't find a lump. And that's why pancreatic cancer is the only form of cancer that still has a survival rate in the single digits, 6%. It's the 4th leading cause of death from cancer. And to complete that very unvirtuous circle, at least here in Canada, it gets the least amount of research funds and the least amount of charitable donations, partly because there are almost no survivors to advocate for it. So back to Idea City. 5 years ago at Idea City 2008, I was feeling a bit off. Nothing terrible, nothing that would even keep me away from one of these great parties. I kind of had vague aches and sort of gastrointestinal discomfort. And actually, I'd been feeling like that for months. And I'd been back and forth to the doctor. So first, he gave me some pills. He said, this will fix you up in a couple of weeks. Didn't work. I went back there and we figured that maybe I had an ulcer. So he arranged for a breath test for H. pylori. So I did the breath test, negative. Then we did a series of x-rays on my upper gastrointestinal tract. That also came back negative, and at that point I was starting to get pretty worried. I went to the conference. A few weeks later, the pain was unbearable, and I went to emergency, and they found a stage 3 pancreatic tumor through a CT scan. Just so you know, a CT scan is a very invasive test. It involves injecting radioactive dye. It's not something you would ever do on a routine basis. And a routine kind of a test is what we need in order to find pancreatic cancer when it is still curable. So, enter Jack Andraka and his novel paper sensor that he says he can produce for about 3 cents. Jack.
When I was 13, I lost a close family friend who was like an uncle to me to pancreatic cancer. When the disease hit so close to home, I knew I needed to learn more. So I went online to find answers. Using the internet, I found a variety of statistics on pancreatic cancer, and what I had found shocked me. Over 85% of all pancreatic cancers are diagnosed late, when someone has less than a 2% chance of survival. Why are we so bad at detecting pancreatic cancer? The reason today's current modern medicine is a 60-year-old technique. I mean, that's older than my dad. But also, it costs $800 per test and is grossly inaccurate, missing 30% of all pancreatic cancers. Your doctor would have to be ridiculously suspicious that you have the cancer in order to give you this test. Learning this, I was sure there had to be a better way. So I went back online and I found what a sensor would really have to look like to effectively diagnose pancreatic cancer. The sensor would have to be inexpensive, rapid, simple, sensitive, selective, and minimally invasive. And so then I was just sitting in biology class when suddenly it hit me. Essentially, you take these antibodies and weave them into the network of nanotubes, such that you have a network that only reacts with one specific protein. But also, it will change its electrical properties based on the amount of protein present due to the properties of these carbon nanotubes, and thus indicate the presence of pancreatic cancer.
Get the latest Idea City news instantly. Follow us on Twitter.
There's a reason why this test hasn't been updated in over 6 decades. And that's because when we're looking for pancreatic cancer, we're looking at your bloodstream, particularly for these different levels of proteins in there. And this sounds very straightforward, but it's anything but. Because you have these liters and liters of blood that's already abundant in protein, and you're looking for this tiny increase in this tiny amount of protein. That's next to impossible. I mean, that's like trying to find a needle in a stack of nearly identical needles. I went back online, and to any teenager's best friends for knowledge, Google and Wikipedia, how I pass every high school test. And I found an article of over 8,000 different proteins that are found in your bloodstream when you have these different types of cancers. And so then I just decided I'm just going to chug through this. And I felt a little bit like I was playing this video game called Pokemon, like Pokemon Catch Them All, like proteins gotta research them all. And on the 4,000th try, when I was close to losing my sanity, I found one protein. The name of the protein I found was called mesothelin, and it's just an ordinary run-of-the-mill type protein, unless you have pancreatic, ovarian, and lung cancer, in which case it's found at these very high levels in your bloodstream. But also it's found in the earliest stage, when someone has close to a 100% chance of survival. So now that I found a reliable protein to detect, I then shifted my focus to actually detecting that protein, and thus the presence of pancreatic cancer. And my epiphany moment came in the most unlikely of places. High school biology class, the absolute stifler of innovation. Particularly with my high school teacher. So essentially, I'd snuck in this article on what are called single-walled carbon nanotubes, long, thin pipes of carbon that are an atom thick and 1/50,000th the diameter of your hair. And they're extremely, extremely small, but they have these amazing properties, kind of like the superheroes of material science. And then while I was sneakily reading this article on their properties under my desk, we are supposed to be learning about these things called antibodies. And an antibody, you can imagine like a lock and key. It only reacts with one specific protein, in this case, the cancer biomarker. And so then I was just sitting in biology class when suddenly it hit me. What I could do is I could combine these two concepts. Essentially, you take these antibodies and weave them into the network of nanotubes, such that you have a network that only reacts with one specific protein. But also, it will change its electrical properties based on the amount of protein present due to the properties of these carbon nanotubes, and thus indicate the presence of pancreatic cancer. However, there's a catch. Essentially, what happens is you have these networks of nanotubes, and they're extremely flimsy. And since they're so delicate, they need to be supported. So that's why I chose to use paper. And making a paper sensor for cancer is about as simple as making chocolate chip cookies. Essentially, you start with some water, You pour in some nanotubes, pour in some antibodies, mix it up, take some paper, dip it, dry it, and then you can detect cancer. After I had finally gotten all of my ideas together, I then realized something. Hey, I might need a lab. I mean, I can't do cancer research on my kitchen countertop. Essentially what happened is I had the brilliant idea to send 200 different professors my research plan, this 32-page long document that I thought no one in their right mind would read. And I sat back waiting for these positive emails to pour in, and I would be like, hell, this is genius kid, I'm be able to pick and choose my lab. And then reality took hold. Got 199 rejections. However, eventually I got one positive email back from Dr. Aaron Maestra at Johns Hopkins University. So I go in with these giant stacks of blue ring binders full of these different articles I had found, 500 of them. And I go in, I slam them down on his desk, and he kind of peers over them. And he's just like, so tell me about your project. And as soon as I launch into my description, he spots a few PhD students, and he's like, get in here, get in here. And then he goes around and collects all of the PhD students, gathers them in the room, and there are 20 of them. And then me and the professor all crammed into this tiny room. I was just like, how many PhDs can we fit into a room? I think we might have set the Guinness World Record there. However, the interrogation begins, and they're just firing these questions at me, trying to sync my procedure. However, I got through it. I answered all the questions. I guessed on quite a few, and I always guessed C, so I got them all right. I guessed C, just like I do on my SATs. And I landed the lab space I needed to do my research. And just as soon as I started, I realized my once brilliant procedure had something like 1 million holes in it. That might have been the reason why some of those professors rejected me, but in my opinion, I think they're just butt heads. And then I just start going through this. I'm patching up all these holes in my procedure, and eventually 7 months later, I end up with one small paper sensor that costs 3 cents and takes 5 minutes to run. It's 168 times faster, over 26,000 times less expensive, and over 400 times more sensitive than our current standards for pancreatic cancer detection. But also, it is 100% accuracy so far in trials, and can detect the cancer in the earliest stage, when someone has close to 100% chance of survival. So in the next 2 to 5 years, this patent-pending sensor could potentially lift the once dismal survival rates of pancreatic cancer from 5.5% to close to 100%. And it would do similar for ovarian and lung cancer. But it wouldn't stop there. By switching out that antibody, you could potentially detect any protein in the world, meaning any disease in the world, ranging from Alzheimer's to other forms of cancer, even HIV, AIDS, and heart disease. Now, what does it say about the flow of information, access to academic knowledge, and the ability to innovate when Harvard University, the richest academic university in the world, cannot afford its articles?
Get the latest Idealist news, presenter information, and watch streaming video at ideacityonline.com.
So through this, I've learned this very important lesson. There are 2 things that are blocking innovation. The first of which is that 75% of the entire world lacks a basic tool to innovate. They lack access to the internet. Because through the internet, anything is possible. Theories can be shared, and you don't have to be a professor with multiple degrees to have your ideas valued. You could be a 15-year-old like me. And then also, regardless of your age, your gender, your ethnicity, any of that, it's just your ideas that count. However, these people just don't have access. Even though the internet allows us to improve our conditions and express ourselves, it allows us to emerge from this delicate fragmentation of nations and instead emerge as one united human race. But these people don't have access, and thus lack the basic tools to innovate because they don't have the knowledge to innovate at the moment. They're creative, but if you don't have the knowledge, then how can you innovate? Then there's a second roadblock. Most scientific journals are locked tightly behind paywalls. For example, essentially what happens is But the first time I ran into one of these, I was in 6th grade doing my first science fair. I was this little nerdy 6th grader with like a bowl cut and these big glasses, like kind of stereotype of a nerd. And I go on and I'm trying to get this article and it says, pay $35 if you want this article. I begged my parents, give me $35, come on, come on. And I just bought them straight for a week, just as any normal little kid would do. And I bring them this giant list of reasons, I'm reading it off, and they're, fine, Jack, just take this $35, just stop annoying us. So the day I bought that article, I felt like Charlie Bucket buying the golden ticket. And then I realized it had nothing to do with my research. And the unfortunate thing about these paywalls is they don't have a return policy. Scientific journals have commoditized scientific knowledge. They have locked up the most valuable human resource on the planet, scientific knowledge. You see, they've made an $8 billion market. Harvard University can't afford these subscriptions. It states in a statement to all of its people, major periodical subscriptions, especially to electronic journals, published by historically key providers, cannot be sustained. Continuing on these subscriptions on their current footing is financially untenable. Now, what does it say about the flow of information, access to academic knowledge, and the ability to innovate when Harvard University, the richest academic university in the world, cannot afford its articles? It has $3 million. 15-year-olds don't have that type of money. What we need is to unlock these paywalls, to realize that this is not acceptable. The public funds this research. The journal takes in that research and then turns it around and sells it back to us at inflated prices. And this issue is exacerbated for smaller state schools. This tier-based approach to the dissemination of scientific knowledge, in my opinion, is extremely detrimental to the entire field, and we need to fix it. And not just one singular person can fix this. We as a whole human race have to fix this. This is our problem, not just one of our problems. And so hopefully, we can all strive to solve this, because really, all you need is an idea and a bit of passion. I mean, I didn't even know what a pancreas was when I started on this. So if a 15-year-old could find a new way to detect pancreatic cancer, just imagine what you could do. Thank you.
Do you have a timeline for starting those trials? Because those are the key.
Yeah, so far I've already tested it on 100 patients, and currently I'm working with Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp about developing a stage 2 clinical trial.
Great ideas are meant to be shared. Join the discussion on Facebook.
Jack was with us on Wednesday, but yesterday he zipped down to Washington. Jack, tell us what you did in Washington.
I was accepting an award from President Barack Obama for Champions of Change in Open Science.
So, first of all, usually when someone develops some kind of innovation in a university lab, the university gets a piece of it, but you own this outright. How did that happen?
Well, actually, when I came to the professor, I was 14 years old, and in the US, that is considered child labor, which is a big no-no for an academic institution. So essentially what happened is they kind of snuck me through the back door. They said I was a volunteer. And I was a volunteer who conveniently got placed in that lab and conveniently had the duty of doing this research. And so that's how I got in. And since that's not in their clause that I signed, then they didn't have any right.
There's still a long road before this becomes available, and it still has to be approved. So tell us what has to happen before we can use this thing.
Yeah, so the unfortunate reality is with our current bureaucratic approval system is it will take this 10 years to reach the market. Because first you have to reach all the legalities, because I'm talking to these large biotech companies, because 15-year-olds can't really just go and mass produce all these sensors. I have to have the infrastructure to do it, so I'm going through these large biotech companies. So first all of those legalities have to be sorted out. Then they have to go through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4 with huge sample sizes, and that's FDA approval. And only then can you use this. And then also has to get endorsement by major clinicians, and then has to get mass produced. So there's a lot going into this. However, hopefully soon it will be on the market.
Do you have a timeline for starting those trials? Because those are the key.
Yeah, so far I've already tested it on 100 patients, and currently I'm working with Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp about developing a stage 2 clinical trial.
I have contact with doctors who are experts in this field, and the one thing they really want to see is something published in one of those journals you were just trashing. Is that going to happen?
I'll be publishing a journal called Public Library of Science, or PLOS, because it's one of the only open source journals out there. And so hopefully when I publish in those journals, then people will see that by publishing those, you're actually helping advance the next future of innovation.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Idea City is a place where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time, our planet needs it most. Idea City is a place. Everybody sing. Where ideas come face to face.